Hey guys, just wanted to share some random thoughts, some things that are going on. Been trying, my best to update the blog recently, and I just personally like doing these videos instead of sitting down and typing. Uh, so just want to share a few things. As a lot of you know, my grandfather passed away. I got to had the great privilege of speaking at his memorial service, and basically talked about four things. Went from the aspect of how would I describe my grandfather to my children, especially to my son Drake, who's young and probably will not have any memories of his great grandfather. And I went from it, four things. Number one, my grandfather was a man that loved the Lord and the church. Number two, he loved his family. Number three, he had a great sense of humor. And number four, he was a hard worker. He was one of the hardest workers I have ever known, probably the hardest worker. And then my dad would be number two, and then my brother would be number three. Sometimes I struggle with thinking, why did I miss out on that gene? I wish I had that gene. I'm glad I didn't get the bald gene. I am the only Mullikin male, besides Drake, with hair and my cousins. One funny story my dad told me about my grandfather is a couple weeks ago. My dad was up spending some time with my grandmother and grandfather. My grandmother's been confined to a wheelchair for a couple years. My grandfather decided he wanted to weigh her. And so they got the scale out, they wheel my grandmother over, and they're getting ready to put her on the scale. My dad realizes, if we stand her up on this scale and we let her go, she's going to fall down. And so my grandfather kind of relented and said, you know what, you're right. They put her back in her wheelchair, strapped her back in. And my grandmother looks at my grandfather and says, how much did that thing say I weighed? My grandfather said, a lot. That's just the kind of sense of humor he had. And I've been, since he passed, so many different people have come up to me and just shared different stories like that. And that's just been a great encouragement. On a lesser note, let's talk some college football. I heard so many Clemson fans Sunday say, man, I can't believe Clemson blew that game against Georgia Tech. Why? Why can't you believe that? This is Clemson. This is what Clemson does now. They blow it. They give away leads. They can't get it done in the clutch. Sometimes they do. There's been the rare occasion when they have won a close game. But for the most part, since the Bowden era began, this has been a team that has given away victory after victory after victory. I remember Tommy West last game. It probably started with him. It was his last game before they announced his firing. My wife and I were there, and they were playing Georgia Tech, and you just knew Georgia Tech had the ball. Not a lot of time left, and you just knew Georgia Tech was going to drive right down the field and score to win, and that's exactly what they did. And so that has led to me jumping off the Clemson wagon, and love me or hate me, whatever. I'm not getting my heart broken anymore, and that's really what it came down to. Is how many times can you allow your heart to be broken before you jump ship? Hopefully for Clemson fans, it's not going to be 85 years for you like it was for the Red Sox, and that was obviously worth the wait. And I don't know. But talking about college football, I'm all for a playoff. I want there to be a playoff, but you have to agree with me that Saturday, as Alabama's playing Florida and Texas is playing Nebraska, that those two games had a great national semifinal feel to them. And that, to me, doesn't prove the greatness of the BCS. That proves to me how awesome a playoff would be. You think about how intense those games were, how anticipated those games were. Now, the Alabama-Florida game was not a good game by any stretch of the imagination. Alabama simply dominated Florida. They had been waiting a year for that rematch, and they did not let that opportunity slip away. Played a great game, and Urban Meyer, they just got outcoached. And Alabama just had a better team, and it just became so clear that Tim Tebow basically did not have a great year statistically, but simply willed his team to win 12 games this year somehow. And that just, again, I don't think he's a Heisman candidate this year, but he proved how great of a college player he is. The Texas game, oh my goodness, that would have been one of the great upsets in college football history if Nebraska had won, but Texas pulled it out, and they're going to get a shot at Alabama. I think there's some other great, intriguing BCS matchups. Some people were complaining about TCU and Boise State matching up in the Fiesta Bowl. I think that's great. They're both undefeated, and so in a sense, you've got 5 undefeated teams. You've got Cincinnati, Boise State, TCU, Alabama, and Texas. I'm pretty sure I'm leaving one out. Don't think so. Cincinnati, they're going to have a great bowl game. I'd like to see Cincinnati. How would they fare against one of these other big time schools? The BCS does. If you're not one of the Big Six conferences, you do not have a shot at playing for the national championship. And number two, if you are not in one of the Big Six conferences, you don't have a shot at the Heisman. Case Keenum for Houston threw for over 1,000 more yards than any other player and was near the top in touchdown passes. Did not get a sniff of the Heisman. And we're talking about a Houston team that went 10-2. I believe they had a great season. But yet these other players who had subpar years, but they got invited to the Heisman ceremony on name recognition only, just because it's just like the actual football standings. They were pre-ranked Heisman, and they just kind of simply slipped through to the end of the year. And I think that's unfortunate. Not only that happens to schools, but it's happening to individuals when it comes to the Heisman Trophy. And I think year after year, the Heisman Trophy is becoming somewhat of a joke, even though people are still putting a lot of stock in it. Lastly, let's go talk a little bit of baseball. The Yankees. I don't know how the trade for Curtis Granderson is going to work out for them. I saw they re-signed Andy Pettit. Granderson. To me, the Yankees. The reason that it took them so long to win a championship is they weren't going out and getting a certain type of player. They were just going out and just buying whoever the hot free agent was. Whereas the Red Sox have tended to they've looked a little bit more defense the last few seasons, but they looked at guys who got on base and could work a count and had a pretty high slugging percentage. Saying all that, baseball is becoming more and more where you're drafting and you're signing certain types of players, and I hope that the Red Sox aren't getting away from that. If they do go after Adrian Beltre to play third, he's a great defensive third baseman. Offensively, is he patient enough at the plate to fit into, I guess, the system that they're kind of doing there in Boston? And obviously they need another big bat to replace Jason Bay if they're not able to re-sign him. But again, it all comes down to pitching, which the Yankees have. They did give up some relievers, and the Red Sox have as well. Red Sox are still looking for somebody to replace Kurt Schilling in the clubhouse, but also on the mound. So those are just my thoughts, some random thoughts on a lot of different things. Hope everybody's having a great week. I'm trying to get some big projects done and still battling this cold or whatever. So have a great week, and we'll talk to you later.